Fire away.
I'm on the public portal and I can't open the attachments
Why are you on the public portal?
because I use that sometimes as well. But I'm just noticing that.
Um, Chase, can you help him?
Director Martman, try minimizing your screen or not make it full screen. See if that helps. I'm on the portal myself right now and I'm able to get in.
Thank you. I may just try different, maybe Google Chrome. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Needs help? Oh, really? I guess I should have asked everyone to do a quick test to make sure that all their settings on your computer are correct. But with that, I'd like to welcome everyone to the special Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, January the 5th. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in the traditional and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish people. Take a moment to acknowledge that. My name is Ian Morrison. I'm the director for Cowichan Lake South Scotts Falls, and I'll be chairing the meeting today. I'd like to remind folks, not only around the table, but in the gallery, to put your electronic equipment on mute or silent or vibrate. Also like to welcome alternate directors Champ and Duncan to the table today. Welcome. The scintillating budget discussions, you're so fortunate to be drafted into that exercise. And also like to acknowledge Directors Martman, Nicholson, and McClinton are joining us virtually today. So I'll have to make sure I scan the screen often. With that, we have, I'll turn to Mr. Robbins. Approval of the agenda is the first item, I believe.
Yes, please. A motion to approve the agenda as circulated.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Deck. Any discussions, additions, deletions? Think not. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Public input period.
Agenda item number 2, public input period. I do know that Mr. Evans is, would like to address the committee from the gallery.
Mr. Chair, I am Cliff Evans, a director of the Shawnigan Basin Society. And today I'm here to, welcome the new board. It's nice to see everyone so energetic, and I'm sure you'll have a good time today. In the Basin Society, we provide a service to the CVRD. We have a contract. It's under, and you can look it up if you want, is if you go to the CVRD bylaw 3737 and function 488, we have a contract where we supply a service to the CVRD. And I just want to run some of the new members through some of the things we do. We have several doctors with us who write scientific papers. We've had one of our directors had his own helicopter, so not too much got away from us. But I just want to show you some of the things that we do. May I have the first slide, please? And Chase is going to put the slides on for me. I'm quite lucky. This here is a photo of the weir at Shawnigan Lake, and the weir controls the water about 6 months of the year at 116.3 meters above sea level.
Excuse me, Mr. Evans, hang on a second. I can't see anything on the screen. Thank you.
Please proceed.
So, if 6 months of the year, the weir gates are wide open, and the water is controlled by our Pineapple Expresses, the water coming down into the lake, and hydraulic back pressure. On the day I went to the weir with my comrades, the weir was at 116.42 meters above sea level. And the lake, and by the way, we've had CVRD put in an automatic sensor for the lake so that anyone in the public can go onto that site and see what the height of that lake is right now. So on the day before, and I got this mixed up yesterday, so I thought I better get these figures straight because Director Stone or Mayor Stone will be checking on them. The lake was at 117.209 meters. So the lake is only about 400 or 500 meters away from the weir. So we know that there's some hydraulic resistance there someplace. Next slide, please.
Hang on a second, Cliff. I think we owe you 30 seconds. Go ahead.
So next slide, please. So we go down to the river, and you will see on there, oh, wait a sec. First of all, this is the left picture is a view from the weir looking downstream, and you can see the logs that are in the stream. Those logs aren't really hurting the salmon, but it's causing back pressure on the system to drain the lake and keep the lake from flooding. We then took a walk down to Williams Park, which is just below the Black Swan as you come into Shawnigan, and you see a bench in the park and a trench there. So we know that some water is taking out the pathway. Next picture, please. And on the left picture, you see a culvert that runs underneath the Shawnigan Lake Road. And the picture after shows the size of the culvert running underneath the path. So you can obviously see that it needs some new engineering. Next picture, please. You can look down the path there and you can see how the gravel is being taken out of the path and pushed into Shawnigan Creek. The next picture to the right is the beach at Mason's Beach, and you can see that there's logs, and it is the lake is up quite a bit more than it should be. Next picture, please.
Cliff, I am going to have to ask you to start moving towards your conclusion.
Yeah, I can stop anytime you want, but this was for the people to see what we were doing, and I thought I could have some extra time to just let the new people know what was going on, if that is permissible, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you're 5 minutes into your 3-minute session at this point, so it will entertain you for a moment or two longer, but please move towards wrapping up.
So to wrap up with, on function 35 or 3737, we have a contract with you, and we have been funded at zero for the last 4 years. We need funding now because of COVID. We've had some very generous of contributions from people we've helped out with contaminated soil problems, lead in their water, and we've had good, we've been able to run the society without the help from the CVRD. With COVID, we find that we are now going in the red. We need the help. You need money to leverage money for grants. And you know this from the Green Society, which has been very successful. You know this from the Cowichan watershed. So I'm asking you, this board here, to see that the function 448 is reinstalled and that you value our work. No one likes to work and not be valued. And please reinstall our funding so we can work together in the future and keep our environment in A1 shape. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I think we still have some time. Would you please come to the mic? Welcome.
Hello, you see new faces here. I'm Sheila Bell Irving. I was the front line in Shawnigan Lake for the toxic soil dump. I spoke yesterday. I'm not going to repeat what I said yesterday. I'm hoping that you can all go and just watch it yourself on YouTube, like I did for my family so they could see me. Today I'm going to talk about Function 488, which is a tax function that I personally supported. And my property taxes are over $10,000 a year. Think about that, $10,000 a year. I don't use half the functions of that $10,000 that I pay for. The one function that I do want to pay for, 488, has been put at zero. Now, I don't know why Sierra has decided that we are not worth anything, but I do know that she quoted 2 years ago that we were a waste of taxpayers' money. Now, personally,
Sheila,
as a taxpayer...
Could you please not refer to directors in a derogatory fashion? That's not what we're here for today.
All righty.
You're providing input to us on Function 488.
488 is a function where we are there to protect the watershed. The money is to go towards protecting the watershed. I have been doing that for 9 years of my life. I get sued. I get injunctions. And now I want to be able to see the lake being cleaned. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen if we don't get funding. I've been doing my own work by building floating gardens and using biochar in the lake to clean the contaminants out, but it's all coming out of my pocket. I can't afford to do that for the whole entire lake. I'd like to be able to use the Basin Society's funding to help people clean their own water, because nobody else is going to be doing it for us. It's become a community initiative, and we have to have the support of the CVRD. It is a tax function, and as far as I know, a tax function is legal, ethical, and moral to continue funding. I do not believe that it should be just taken away, because we don't know why, but just taken away. We are literally a watershed group for a watershed that is in complete distress. We have more toxic soil dumps than any other watershed in the Cowichan Valley. We have a bad water quality. I mean, it's to the point where we have to take the initiative to do something. The Shawnigan Basin Society is that group that is taking the initiative. We have restored shorelines. We are doing whatever we can to monitor the toxic dumps. We were testing water, but we can't afford to do that because we don't have the funding. Please restore our funding so that we can get back to doing the good work of cleaning and caring and monitoring our water. It's important. This is for our grandchildren. This isn't about us. This is about my grandchildren. This is about the future generations that will be able to call Shawnigan Lake home. Now, we need to get our funding back, so please do the right thing and restore the funding to the group that is doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Robbins, do we have anybody who's come online to present any information to us?
No one online for committee today, Mr. Chair.
Director Segal.
Yeah, because I'm new, I'm wondering if there's going to be a time where we get to discuss Function 488 through this budget
Absolutely,
process?
but it's not going to be today.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay. And thank you for the great segue. I have spoken with staff, so I'm sure all of us read our material very diligently over the holidays and came here prepared to have some, in-depth discussion on the material that we have before us. And then after yesterday's meeting, I found out that clearly wasn't the intent that was put forward by staff for today. And so of course, it's the will of the committee as to exactly what we do, but it's been suggested to me by staff that a line-by-line approach to the material isn't what was expected by staff today, that this is a general overview, not only on our process, but to sort of give us a teaser and material to think about for when we are actually going to go in depth and ask all of those questions that need to be asked. And this came up yesterday, if you'll note on our sheet here, that there's all of the supplementals in here, and it's just not appropriate, at least in the process that we've had in the past, for the whole committee to be going through material which is really exclusive. A lot of it is exclusive to electoral areas. So there's further meetings scheduled where staff are going to be coming fully prepared to discuss all of the material in here. So this is more of a general overview and an explanation as to process and sort of what is going to be expected in the weeks ahead. But I was thinking this would be a great opportunity, because we're gathered as a whole board here, or as a whole committee, for us to maybe go around table before we bring staff up to talk about some of the material that they presented to us, and just talk about what some of your expectations or thoughts or hopes for. Or I know I said a few things yesterday at EAS. I think Director Martman has been thinking about some comments. So I look to the committee, would just going around and hearing each other and having a little discussion around that would that be an appropriate way to start off the meeting? So I see a couple of nods. What about on screen? Everybody on screen okay with that approach? Director Wilson put his hand up. So Director Wilson, what have you got to share?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit, I'm looking at the sheet which has been given out to us here, and I'm noticing that there are totals all the way along the bottom line there. The one total that seems to be missing is the 2023 requisition percentage increase. And that, to me, is probably the most important total, that one in the down here. Because if you look at the report, there's a number which jumps out at us, which says if core and all supplementals were to be approved today, requisition increase would be 15.95%. That figure's not here. That should be here as well. And I'm a little bit disappointed that's the one figure that's missing. So we're looking at 16% increases at the moment if everything were to be approved. That's a big number.
And I think that's a perfect question to bring up, and if we go round table and when staff get up here and discuss. But as I was suggesting, I think maybe we sort of step back, look at this from a bit of a high level perspective, maybe some goals and objectives that you may have for your electoral area, your municipality, in regards to the type of tax increase exposure that we may have. It doesn't have to take long, and given the material that we have and the desire of staff to not necessarily, we don't need to do our work twice. We don't need to do it here and then do it at the meeting that's appropriately scheduled for doing that. So with that, any other comments, suggestions around how we proceed today? Well, I think what I'll do is I'm going to start, we're supposed to go counterclockwise, aren't we? I'm going to start with Director Stone and go counterclockwise that way. So, Director Stone, I'm just some introductory general remarks about your approach to how we do budget this year.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of things are different, and I've talked to a couple members of staff and our CAO, and I understand all that, but I've never seen this many budget meetings, but we'll talk about schedule later. I've also never even contemplated numbers like this. And I do have a question, and you put me on the spot after I said, I have a question, I don't want to embarrass myself, because I got up at 5 o'clock this morning to look at it again and see if I could sort of square this number, but in the sort of list in the staff report of all of the items, there's this discussion of, okay, this is regional rec, which for a lot of partners is kinds of ins and outs, right? Like for Ladysmith, that obviously goes in and creates a huge tax increase on paper, but is removed from the municipal portion, so it's kind of a wash. So the number is kind of, in some cases, artificially inflated on an area by area basis. But when I look through the totals, it shows regional recreation as a $6 million hit this year. But then it shows at the base, at the very end of all of the numbers, a roughly 5-point-something million total increase. So we're being informed through the staff report and through everything I'm reading, so I'm happy to embarrass myself because Ian put me on the spot, but that's a $6 million new item. But when you get down to the total at the bottom, you're talking about a $5 million increase. So that would say, based on what I'm trying to do, all the ins and outs, that the actual rest of the budget is a decrease, but that's obviously not the case. So I was just wondering if I could get some clarity on that to start. And so that's looking at attachment of this item. Oh, my attachment's disappeared. One sec.
So let me jump in here for just a sec, because we had a lot of questions, and staff had to go away from the Electoral Area Services Committee yesterday with a list of questions that they would be coming back to.
And I do have a
to us
supplemental.
with. So fair enough. And so I think that for the purposes of going around the table, I think staff will be taking note of all the questions that are put forward. And if they've got the ability to address those today, then I think that's fantastic. But I think because we're going to be having in-depth, I don't want to call them line-by-line meetings in the near future. A lot of those questions will likely be answered when we've got the full complement of staff here and be able to answer some of those questions. So I
Okay.
think staff made note of that. You have a
then
supplemental.
My supplemental is more of a statement, and, you know, we're all dealing with this. I know I've talked to a number of mayors across the island and across the province. You know, these 5, 7, 8, 10% numbers aren't unusual right now, and it's a tragedy in many ways, because this is at a time when our residents and our businesses can't really afford it. I'm a business owner, I'm a resident. I can tell you right now, after the last few years of losses, I can't afford it. But what I have heard is that I know our staff are all aware of that as well. So I'm hopeful, and I know that we're already under a time crunch, that we can find a way to find savings. I don't think there's any way that we can go forward with a 12%, a 10%, a 15% increase. Setting aside regional recreation perhaps, in this kind of economic times. So hopefully we can work together collaboratively between staff and the directors to bring that number down. And I'm hopeful that staff is kind of thinking, okay, when the directors reach out for help, maybe there's some life preservers in store that we could moderate those increases this year, because I think that we have a responsibility, obviously, to the organization, but more so to the people that we serve. And I think that it would be irresponsible of us to not move forward, looking for constructive and collaborative ways to sort of keep that number down this year.
Thank you, Director Stone, and that's why I went to you first, because you can handle a little being put on the spot, and I think that's a good frame for some of the discussion today. Also, if you don't really have anything to add, you don't have to add anything. You can pass if you're so inclined, and you know, I've done that in the past. Hard to believe, but so I think I'll go to Director Martman next. And do you have any general comments about our process and the material before us?
Thanks, Chair. just a couple of short ones. Like Aaron, I too trying to tease out the regional recreation and what the impact is overall to requisition. But I know for my area, taxes are going to be are hard as it is, yet alone trying to have an increase. So I would be looking to where are the savings. And one of the things that strikes me when looking at other municipalities or other areas that have budgets coming out through the news is that they do asset management separately. And I think that might be a bit more palatable, and if we understand what percentage might be going to asset management as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Martman. I'll go to Director Toporowski next.
I didn't test my mic. Can you hear me? Good? All right. Yeah, I feel the same way in regards to what Director Stone had mentioned about the pandemic that we're just still in the middle of. We're not over it yet, and we're still trying to move through recovery for businesses, and they're starting to open up, and our taxpayers are feeling the crunch at the grocery store and whatnot. So I know we've been through these budgets before, Chair, and we've put in our suggestions, and it's been tweaked and moved around, and so it looks different almost every time it's presented to us, somewhat. But yeah, I know that this information, this attachment A, where the red, yellow, and green show which ones are most urgent to, you know, the ones that are maybes or something we could put to the side. But I'd like to see through this budget, I know we had gone through, I don't know, a few years ago when the pandemic started with trying to get to 0% increase. I know we're living in a dream on that as well. And also the budgets, we have to consider everything that we need, wants and needs. Again, that's where I'm looking at, and if we can bring this discussion back to the staff to see if there's any savings that we can see in this bringing this number down. I know it's probably going to catch up to us later on, but I think this will give some relief to everyone all around. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Toporowski. I'll go to Director McGonigal next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year, everyone here, everyone watching online. Looking at this doesn't make me very happy, but it seems that we've been in a perfect storm for about 4 years. Everything culminating to give us pressures under our budget discussions, whether it's health restrictions, travel restrictions, COVID, and now there's considerable angst, especially in the western region, with a 23% increase in BC assessments on residential properties in Lake Cowichan. People are wondering how that is going to impact their tax requisition as well. You try to calm the nerves that increases in assessment don't necessarily equate to tax increases until you look at the supplementals that have been provided. We have neglected these supplementals for years on advice from staff on the ones that have been needed, and now they are showing up as one cumulative block that are more than just needed but are imperative. So it's going to be a considerable discussion moving forward on which ones are the top high priority on the supplementals moving forward. I too know that we're under timing pressures as opposed to previous years where we would have been done in December on the budget, but with the election of new directors, et cetera, we have pushed that forward. The increases in regional recreation and waste management have put significant pressures on my community for projects that we could do moving forward in municipal increases. So I'm not only pressured here, but also pressured in the municipal aspect of the budget negotiations moving forward. So that's my consideration. Just hoping that we can sharpen our pens and look at the ones that are absolutely imperative to the corporation's well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. I'll go to Director Nicholson next.
Thank you. Tough times. Every budget's tough times, though, and I get it's getting tougher. So I think that this really speaks to having some serious conversation about affordability when we have our strategic planning discussions. And I regret that we haven't had a chance to get started on that before we do the budget. I also would say for the new people, it's really important not to fall into the trap of looking at the overall numbers, because no one resident pays for everything. So you have to, I really think it's important to look at the individual functions and what's required to do those individual functions. And then the question is how important they are. So it's really important not to not invest in a function if you think it's important, because I think we're paying the price of many years of underinvestment in our services. We don't have particularly in the electoral areas, there's no economy of scale when you're delivering services, and people's expectations, people move out to a rural area and they expect to have the same level of service that they get in a city. So I think that we really need to kind of manage all those things on a whole bunch of fronts and think about how we do that moving forward. Can't solve it this budget round, but we need to be starting to think a little bit differently, I think, about how we do provide services to the community.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know where to start in here, and I've made a few notes here. And one of the things that I'm going to quote for some of the comments that I've heard here, and I'm going to apologise to Director Stone first of all if I get this slightly wrong, where he said something like 5, 8, 10% rises seem to be the norm nowadays. I think that's basically what you said here, and I just can't get my head around that kind of thing here, where we said, well, they're doing 10%, so we have to do 10%. One of the other things that I heard here, and it was Director McGonigal, saying that we need to sharpen our pens. No, we just need to get the erasers out, because sharpening the pens isn't going to do any good whatsoever. I cannot live with these numbers. I'm looking at Area C, 9.99%, call it 10%. During conversation that I had with the CAO and Finance not so long ago, the remark came up that we need to do more with less, and that's one of the things that we need to be looking at. What can we do more efficiently with less money? And that's been half the problem, I think. It's been a question or an attitude of, well, we've got all this, we've got the money coming in, we know it's a guaranteed income. No company in the world has a guaranteed income as we do here, and it is guaranteed. You're going to get it every year. Do it properly. And I've said this many, many times. You can't just say, well, we've got this money and this is how we're going to spend it. One of the other things that Director Nicholson just said there, years of underinvestment in services. May be true, but maybe it's time to look at all those services and see what is really necessary here, because we can't be all things to all men. We need to start looking at priorities, and we need to start looking at what we can and cannot afford. And certainly our residents and taxpayers can't afford this kind of thing, especially when you see lettuce and cauliflowers at $9 a throw. Sorry, but I'm not happy with these numbers at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wilson. Director Segal.
Thank you. Yeah, as a new director, I'm looking for lots of support from the longer-standing directors. This is my first budget season, and I'm just figuring out how taxes work. So I am interested in, property assessments have gone up on average 12% in BC. So how does that affect, our requisitions? And then if our core is going up another 12%, like how that all interplays. And obviously I can tell that 12% is much higher than previous years, but I would like to know some historical, like how to compare these increases to previous years. And there was a bit of talk yesterday about when to use operational reserves. And so I'd like to, like some, discussion or advice around when that is the right time, and if we are in this economic recession, is now that time? Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. How about Director McClinton?
Thank you. Yeah, a few things to add, just probably adding to the chorus here. The first thing I just want to point, these are just going to mostly be comments. First thing I just want to point out is seeming there's some sort of, not divide, but difference in thinking between the electoral areas and the municipal areas. I mean, at that last vote, when it just barely passed, even though the referendum was in favor, there's, so I think that's an important distinction between the areas and the municipalities, and, how we're going to work together to find common ground there. Talking with the folks in my area, the regional RAC is just, really hard to palate, and there's going to be big increases there. So I think that needs to be taken with serious consideration when we're talking about any other sort of increases. I'm a business owner, got 20 odd employees, and wages are not keeping up with inflation. We have an opportunity as a board to make a meaningful impact in people's lives, and I would agree with Director Wilson that the eraser is the way to go. We need to give people time to catch up. We're walking right into probably a big recession, and I think we owe it to our constituents to do right by them, especially when you're looking at, let's get the basic things set up and working, like, our streets aren't getting plowed, our 3 streams isn't set up. Like, let's take care of those things before we start adding other things in. So those would be my comments. I think it's just, we have a real opportunity here to make a meaningful impact in people's day-to-day lives.
Thank you, Director McClinton. Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm finding this exercise refreshing, to have the balance of opinions from people like Director Stone and Director Wilson and Director Nicholson, where it's going to be a healthy debate. I was a bit gobsmacked when I saw 12%, but you take out the recreation and it comes back down to a more palatable number. And I guess staff member John Elzinga has taken great strides to explain what regional recreation is all about, and it's time for the roosters to come home to roost. So it would appear that the EAs have not been perhaps contributing as much as the municipalities. How we square that, I do not know, but it is, like Director Segal, this is an interesting learning opportunity for some new people around the table, so to have some seasoned members guiding us. I like the erasure. I don't like the sharpening of pens, because it's hard to sharpen a pen, but sharpening a pencil and perhaps wiping out lines might be worthy. But I do think that Director Nicholson raises a valid point, that functions across this wide district vary. We all demand different services and have different requirements. So it's going to be a very valuable exercise. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Abbott. Alternate Director Champ.
Thank you, Chair. I am going to pass, as Sierra is not here. Sorry.
Fair enough. Director Manhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I totally agree with the comments around the table. Start with Director Stone, both his supplemental comments I totally agree with. Also with Director Martman regarding asset management separated. I know Oak Bay's got a huge asset management plan, I think $100 million over a number of years, and they've separated that, and they've told their taxpayers actually that certain percentage of their taxes will go to asset management, into a reserve fund for asset management. And Mayor Murdoch's done a great job there with that, and as well as there's a local person here from the Cowichan Valley, actually, that is on the staff of Oak Bay that's worked on this, on separating that and coming up with the asset management strategy. Also agree with, it's all about prioritizing, and that's the decisions you have to make. And I think most of it has to come from first the electoral areas and see what their priorities are. Maybe set a limit to them and say, okay, we're going to have a tax increase of 3%, 4%, whatever each electoral area decides, and then go from there. Because right now we see a huge amount right now, but I think the electoral areas are a big component of the regional district, and I think it has to come down to the electoral areas first and see, okay, what are we going to prioritize in our own areas, and then come to the rest of the board and say, okay, these are our priorities and stuff, and then we can make a better informed decision rather than just a lump sum percentage here. Also, I think governments always talk about the expense side. We're providing this service, providing that service. We never talk about revenue generation. And I think that's where local governments, we actually lack. I know the main source is property taxes for local governments, but I think we just got to think outside the box. I know in North Cowichan, I've been trying to get this done for the last 4 years, and hopefully this year we'll work on the revenue generation side of things rather than just on the expense side. I agree with Director Wilson about sharpening, about taking the eraser out, but each electoral area, I think, has to do that and then come to the table with their own plans. Yeah, and I think a lot of times I've said this, I campaigned on this in the last election, we've got to stay with our own lane. What are the core responsibilities of each electoral area, the CVRD as a whole, and municipalities? Let's stay within our own lane. And I think taxes can actually stabilize or even come down. Like, that's what I campaigned on, and I got over 50% of the vote in the municipality, about 15 candidates for that. I think we must stay with our own lane and not delve into provincial and federal responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Manhouse. Alternate Director Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've already had several meetings at the city regarding our budgeting. It's when you say to people, well, the assessments have gone up on your house, the problem is that a lot of our taxpayers are not actually planning on selling their houses and realizing the profits of an increased assessment. In fact, they're going to be receiving a tax bill that will be up. In Duncan, we're still grappling with the policing costs. We've had to pay, then we got the money back, and then we had a plan. So we do have some reserve funds, but we still actually haven't finished negotiating with the RCMP to come up with a final figure for that. So we don't actually have a final figure for our tax rates. I'm also here because I want to make sure that the work that's been going on at the community center continues well. Regional recreation has been a benefit to the citizens of Duncan. We've seen a decrease, and the usage model I've supported all along. We are faced with the record high inflation, and I'm just hoping that we see, through some of my background work in pension trustee work, that the talk of a soft landing recession is going to come true, and hopefully, we will probably see a recession in the second quarter next year. Hoping that it's going to give us a soft landing recession rather than a hard hit on everyone. So, we haven't finished working on our tax rates in Duncan, but they're similar to what we see here.
Thank you, Alternate Director Duncan. Director Douglas.
Thank you. Not a lot to add to the previous comments. I'm concerned about the projected increase, obviously across the board, but particularly for those of us that are even above the 12%. As Chair Stone mentioned, up to 44% for Ladysmith. North Cowichan second highest at 18%. I think there's five of us are above that 12%. So interested in looking at ways we can reduce that, and appreciated Director Segala's comment about the operating reserves, looking at the balances of those. Some of them do have quite healthy balances, and I do realize there are policies around kind of minimum amounts that the regional district likes to set aside for that, but would be interested in looking more closely if we might be able to access some of that to reduce that projected net tax increase, and any other possible ways to moderate that amount, as Chair Stone pointed out.
Thank you, Director Douglas. So I'll be going to Director Deck, then myself, and I've got Director Stone wanting to make an additional comment. Is there anybody else that would like to maybe have a second go or an additional comment? And looking at the screen, and no one there. So Director Deck.
The CVRD has made a commitment to reduce climate impacts, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I would hate for us to put that on the back burner in order to save money. So there are ways to do both, and one of them we already plan to do, which is the three-stream system, which would reduce costs to take our waste to Washington and keep our organics here and reduce the greenhouse gases that way. And I think in the economic development file, there are things we can do there too. We can use those dollars that we want to invest in economic development to attract and support green initiatives, and maybe even attract people who will help reduce food insecurity, which is a big problem. So I think it would be tragic if we set aside our climate goals when we have an opportunity to do both, to reduce climate emissions and fulfill other goals that we've decided upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Deck. So I think that's everyone. Did I get everybody on the screen there? Great. So I'm going to start by saying I don't think we do this enough, and I'm really amazed at the depth of knowledge and wisdom and passion of folks around the table, and it's kind of cool to see that come out to some extent. And, so thank you for that. Thank you for those in the room and those at an alternate location. I think we all have a fairly common objective, and you know, I want to thank staff for putting out what we've asked them to do, and that's, you know, give us core and give us your priorities, and now we get to go into that fun stuff of passionately discussing and debating these things back and forth. I don't know why, but you know, I was just thinking about that emoji of the head with the, you know, top blowing off, and we're going to be engaged in that. Pardon me? So, you know, we've got an awful lot to cover, and as much as at the end of the budget cycle, our local media will focus on that number, that number really doesn't represent a solid basis of what we're doing and how we've actually budgeted. And I'm going to use a specific example. And a number of years ago, as director for electoral area F, I reduced the dollar amount of taxes that came out of my electoral area by 45%, $45,000. It was significant. So $45,000 less than the year before. So that should result in a negative, right? Well, because of the tweaking of the assessments that year, my residential property taxpayers ended up with a 6% increase in their taxes. Now, how does that work? Well, we'll have a little discussion, and finance will help explain that. And so we've got some work to do around, and our main focus as the larger group is going to be the regional and the sub-regional functions that we participate in. And electoral areas, we'll look at the individual functions when we get into more depth at a future meeting. But I love the comments about, downloading of responsibilities. I can tell you that as part of the updated strong fiscal futures that UBCM did, I forget the name of the updated one, but one of the things they talk about is uploading to other orders of government. They want to download. Maybe we should look at making sure that they're doing the responsibilities, taking the responsibilities of the things that they have, and that's to what Director Mann has said about staying in our lane. For the most part, we haven't heard about, oh God, it's not called gas tax anymore. There's a new name for gas tax. Other than gas tax, the grant funding tap has kind of been shut off. Like, there's not a whole bunch of new dollars flowing out of senior governments. Some pretty big deficits and debts there. But and Director Douglas's comment about, and Director Segal, when do you go into the operational and well, capital you can't touch unless you get a capital project, but when do you go to that? When do you maybe drop below the minimum recommended levels? We're not recommended to use reserves to offset, just like we're not recommended to use surplus to offset requisition increase. We got some pretty big numbers, and we're going to have to do everything we can. So with that, I just want to also mention too, because I've been here for them, just like this board will do, every board in every year before us has done their utmost best to produce a budget that is good for our residents. And there's some numbers in there that, sometimes we've had more success than others. So we will do that. We will have that same struggle as we proceed through our budget exercise, and we've got great partners and staff to help us get there. So that concludes my remarks. I'll go to Director Stone for some additional remarks, and Director Wilson after him.
Thank you. So the only reason I mentioned sort of what I'm seeing around the province is because it highlights the challenge. The inflation that we're seeing is ridiculous. Thankfully for Christmas, I think I got an $8 head of cauliflower, and that was such a bargain. I'm being sarcastic if I didn't put the /S at the end of that comment. But this is, I was going to say not palatable. It's unacceptable. We can't go forward with an increase like that in this economic times. And, I know we have an accountant here, but we're not all accountants. We're not financial professionals. So I understand the sort of inequity in understanding and knowledge, but I think we have a lot of business backgrounds around this table and on the screen. And I think I need to be crystal clear. From my perspective, this budget is not acceptable. A 44% increase. Now, Ladysmith participates in fewer functions than most municipalities. So yes, there's a disproportionate increase. But it might have been 5 or 6 years ago, there was a conversation around this table with pride about how other regional district taxation had increased over the previous several years, comparing the CVRD favorably to those. Well, I can tell you, if you go back to those slides over the last 5 years, it's not favorable. We're all under pressure across the province. The rate of inflation that we're experiencing operationally and on capital projects seems to be an order of magnitude over the sort of general rate of inflation. But in this economic environment, when we're still dealing with the challenges, to be crystal clear, this is not an acceptable budget to put forward to residents. We're going to have to spend time sort of digging into our reflecting comments around this table, functions that we participate in, look for savings, look for opportunities. And frankly, despite my always reluctance to defund a function or to put an eraser to a line item, we're going to have to do that. And I think that what I was trying to get across in my earlier comments were we need all hands on deck for this. That means directors at this table and staff in the organization to say, how can we actually play hero, not zero? Because I haven't seen a number like this across the province. You know, and I'm sure there is. I'm not saying there isn't. But ironically, and this is just a little anecdote, I like watching Parks and Rec. I've gone through it 3 times. And last night, Pawnee went bankrupt, and they had to slash 36% of their budget. And I know it's a television show, but it's a little comic relief. So they shut down parks, and they closed for 3 months. And when they came back, it was obviously a bare bones organization, and they were trying to do things differently. But as the show goes on, and again, I know it's a television show, they recovered and they moved forward, and you know, a season later, you would never know that they went through this. We've been through a lot in my 8 years at this table. We've slashed functions. Sorry about that. But much bigger ones. No offense to Shawnigan Basin Society and their supporters, but you know, Director Wilson knows he was a primary driver around regional parkland acquisition, something that still hurts me to this day, but a necessity. But somehow through all of those cuts we've made to services over the last 5 years, we still put compounding budget increases that show area by area, 50% increase since my time at this table. 50%. And I don't think that's reflective of all of the other macroeconomic factors that we're dealing with. So when we're fixed income, and I agree with Director Manhas, by the way, we need some more freedom to generate non-tax revenues. So that's a legislative piece we need to lobby for. Community benefit corporations would be huge opportunities for both municipalities and regional districts to be able to find ways to support, say, affordable housing, but generate positive revenue through partnering with the province. So solve a problem that's not our responsibility and actually generate revenue. But that's a bigger conversation that'll take years to crack that nut. But we have to do something this year. I think this is just, frankly, and I don't say this lightly, would be irresponsible organizationally to go forward into this economic climate we have with tax increases like this. So I'm hopeful that we all leave today, both directors and staff, will say, how can we go from a number like this to something that is acceptable and reasonable within the economic times we're experiencing? So just to be clear, Director Wilson, it's not acceptable.
We'll go to Director Wilson to close, and then I'm going to suggest that we maybe take a quick break before we get staff up to present on this. And I may actually start the next session with this see if our CAO has any comments on what she's heard. So, Director Wilson, please wrap it up for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I take no offence of what Director Stone says. I think we understand it, yeah. But parkland acquisition, I'm glad you brought that one up, because it is, at the moment, in these times, it's a luxury. We have plenty of parks. You know, I keep a spreadsheet, and 22% of the CBRD area, and including the municipalities, is given over to parkland and publicly accessible lands. We have plenty. We can probably, I hope, put that one on hold again for a couple of years. Let's consolidate. Let's look at what we cannot really afford for the time being and consolidate what we've got. It's a good example that Director Stone came forward with. They went back, they stopped, and then they came back again. We can regrow again. Now, one of the things that Director Manhas said was to keep away from provincial and federal responsibilities, stay in our own lane. Great idea. And then, I think it was Director Morrison said, let's see if we can upload to the provincial and the federal government. How do we do that? How do we do that? Because they don't listen to us anyway. With all due respect, they don't. We're small fry in a very big pond, and they sort of tolerate us. So how are we going to say to them, you guys need to step up and take some of the responsibilities from us that you have been downloading for years and making us the fool guys? That's got to stop. But UBCM, maybe, but we need a lot more to go to that. One of the things that we have been doing over the years is cutting back and using the big L word, liability, volunteers. We can make use of volunteers to do a lot of the stuff that we need done instead of taking on more and more staff. So I would like to look at that very, very briefly. And last thing, could somebody tell me what, under staffing supplementals, what the project hang on, I've got to get my
Can we get into that when staff come back?
IT
Mike?
project manager and an IT security analyst.
Perfect question for when we come back.
I'd like to know about that one. Thank you.
Very good. So just before we break, I'm just looking at my screen here and I'm going to point fingers. Director Toporowski, could we see more of you and less of the ceiling? And Director Abbott, the same. And everybody just take a look at your visuals to see that it's all good. Turn your cameras off. We will reconvene. Well, it's better. Where are we here? Start video. We are buffering. We're just about ready to go.
I think Ben's camera's still high because he's worried about showing his tummy off like he was yesterday. I'm watching it, I'm like, come on, Ben, lift up your camera, and then Mike's like, is there a competition? I'm in the running.
He's not listening.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Just to set up the next section of our meeting and maybe the last section of our meeting, we've got some of our municipal partners have events that they have to leave to attend. We've got one of our electoral area directors has a doctor's appointment nearby, and I'm just going to, again, suggest that pose your questions. Staff will be taking notes, and they will be able to come back with fulsome answers and have a greater discussion at our future meetings. And with that, I'm going to turn to our CAO, Ms. Miles Wilson, to share a couple of thoughts and comments, and then we'll get Ms. Bowen up here. Go ahead. Turn your mic on.
Of course. Hello to everybody on the screen and in the room. So that, just kind of reiterating some of the comments, I think that discussion was very refreshing. I think staff definitely took note. You all shared your thoughts and perspectives, and without going into really much direction, I think we can read between the lines of where you are thinking, how you're thinking, and where you're wanting to go with this budget. So thank you for being honest and sharing what you did. Couple of themes just coming out of what I heard. The distinction between wants and needs. Our core budget is very tightly managed and well managed. There's not a lot of, nipping and tucking that can be really done with that. It's a very frugal budget. But I think staff are already thinking about, opportunities for where little wins can be had with reductions. But just to throw out a number for you, a cut or impact to requisition of 1% means we're going to be cutting $500,000. And for small functions across the board, that's a really difficult task. And I know you folks have looked at things like the land acquisition fund, which sits at about $750,000 right now. But those are like the larger wins are really tough to do. And so, just reiterating some of the comments too about not going outside of our lane and entering into the senior levels of government space. It's a really sensitive subject matter, as we all know, because those spaces are often environmental or climate change related or social. And so those are going to be really tough discussions, but we will be very prepared to help you wade through this process, and we know it's going to be very difficult. And the other thing, I'll talk more about the supplementals when I get to my part of the presentation. I'll just hold off some comments till then, and I'll pass it over to Ms. Bowen to move into her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bowen, the lectern is yours.
So good morning, everybody. So I'm here to present the 2023 budget. It's a very high overview of the budget and kind of where you can find stuff on the website that go with all the information that is in your package. When we sent this out, the website had not been updated. Today it is up to date now with the 2023 draft. So as you know, the CVRD population went up last year, so we're at 89,000. We have 4 municipalities, 9 electoral areas, and we do actual budgets for 178 little functions. So that's what the finance collects all the data from everybody and does the budgets. So most of our most of our money comes from requisition. So out of the 2022 budget, 38% of the revenue came from requisition. So it's a big chunk of the budget. So there are 4 types of funding arrangements within the CVRD. There are regional services where everybody pays into the service. There are electoral area services, which is only funded by the 9 electoral areas. There's sub-regional services, which are funded by areas participating in that service. So transit's one, because not everybody participates in transit. And then there's specified areas, which are within certain areas where only certain properties actually pay into it. So like fire department, not everybody is covered by certain fire departments. So then you wouldn't be paying taxes on that. So this, everybody can see that one. So this is regional services, and it went up quite a bit over the budget from 2022, as you can see. As again, a large increase is due to the regional recreation. Out of that, there's a $2 million increase, just over $2 million. And so that is money that was originally taxed by the munis, is now being taxed by the CVRD. So that money has to come through our tax requisition, so that's why we have to, that number of the 12.9 is such high, is because we now tax for a certain amount that was originally by the munis. Electoral areas, so these are electoral area services. There's no funding provided by the members of municipalities into these ones. An example is community planning. This is an electoral area only, and it only paid by them. So you can see in the scale there's X's, and I'm not sure if there's a couple O's on here. So X's mean that electoral area actually pays fully into that, and the ones that are O's, that means that a portion of them pay into it. Next, these are the sub-regional services within the CVRD, and many of the services are regional in nature. The services to certain areas within the CVRD are funded and shared by those participating in those areas, and it's normally based on assessment basis. And again, you can see that there's X's and O's, so it depends on where you are within it. So some of the areas don't pay fully into it. And then these are the specified areas, and are set up just to a number of properties and do not represent the entire electoral area. And again, it's all based on assessment values. And as you can see, like by the O's, so only certain ones within those areas pay for those. So we have other funding sources, and these are like property taxes, fees and charges, borrowing, grants, reserve funds, and surpluses. So these are other ways that we fund the budget. And then they have services that are funded other than requisition. So like curbside and garbage is user fees. There is no requisition for curbside. And then sewer and water, they are by parcel tax and then by user fees as well. So the current budget approach is incremental. So the current activities and staffing levels are considered core and used as a baseline for the upcoming budget. The approach uses the core as the basis for the preparation of the budget, and requests for changes to current service levels are treated as a supplemental request, which Danielle will go over later. Core expenditures are defined as those requiring to maintain current staffing levels and capital. And then supplementals are for the purpose of budgeting or for items that are addition to the current core and that they're requesting additional items. So for 2023, we did go to the board and we were given no mandate this year. So we went back to staff to say to build your budgets based on core of what you need to run your current service levels. And And this is where we came up with the budget numbers. So core right now is sitting at a 12.19%. That is due to a 6.85% of core services for all of the stuff that we already have. And then we have to add the regional rec onto that, which was the number 4.57. And then there are a few supplementals that were already been pre-approved at the rec commission, so that adds another 0.77%. So that's where the 12.9 comes up. If you approve all the supplementals that are coming up in the next report, you're looking at a total budget of 15.45% for the 2023 budget. So that's with everything. And this is before cuts or changes or anything that happens. So increase to requisition is discussed as a total number, effects on individual properties, and is based on the number of factors, including assessment and location of the property. So these numbers here does not mean that that's what everybody is going to be showing as an increase to their property taxes. Only the participants in the service area contribute to the cost of providing that service. And then this just shows the difference between last year to this year and the changes between each of the areas and how much the increase is. So the budget process always begins in April with direction from the board. Then we do the allocation budgets, and then everything goes out to we do have a budget booklet, we send it all out to the budget managers, and they do up their budgets and then send everything back to finance for review. We bring everything together, and with the supplementals, we bring that to SMT. And then we meet with commissions and budgets. And then this year, everything got switched around due to the election and everything got pushed. So that's why normally we would be doing a lot of these meetings in November and December as opposed to January and February is what we try to do. So that's why right now we're on the January 5th, giving you guys the budget booklet. And then next week we'll have the 12th and the 19th are for electoral area services, which they will discuss their budgets within the electoral areas and the supplementals that go with them. And then on the 26th, we have the special committee of the whole, which is all the regionals, and the rest of the supplementals will be presented at that time. And then in February, we've got some virtual public meetings to discuss all this. We come back at the end of February to do a final review after finance has taken all your changes that you've done at the meetings and put it all together. And then we bring it to the board on the 8th.
Tracy, can you stop there for a second? It's okay, it's fine. Okay, fine. And if anybody wants to get on a list for questions, and I can see our virtual directors on here. If you put your hand up, I'll scan for you as well. So, okay, I've got some names. Sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
Oh, all good. So now we'll come to the part which is all the back pages within the presentation that I provided. These are all now located on the CVRD website. We just updated them this morning, so they're all ready for viewing. So I'll go through a page of each schedule, and then at the end, we'll take you to the website so you can see where you can actually go in and get the information. So the first one is just an overview of the changes from last year to this year. And yeah, I know it's really tiny on there, really small. That last number at the very bottom, the change is $5,427,000 is the change from last year to this year. And then it lists each of the areas where things go up and down. And then it comes out at the end with the number. The Schedule B shows the change by area. It shows the change per 100,000 worth of assessment, and the draft 2023 budget currently uses the 2022 revised assessment roll. We haven't received the new roll yet, so once we get that, we will update everything. So everything right now is based on the 2022. Schedule C looks at the total requisition by area and since 2025. So here's kind of a bit of an analysis of what's happened and what percentages over the years. And as you can see, it's a 12.9 compared to what we've had. So we have had some other high ones, but not this high. Schedule D has a page for each jurisdiction. So on the website, we will have all of the jurisdictions on here. And it details the services in which each area, the cost per 100,000 assessed for each service and the tax rate. It shows the services that only in portion are the area. So at the bottom of the screen, there's ones that only certain people within that. So those little areas down by specified areas where only certain people will pay into them. So not everybody will be paying into those ones. Schedule E shows the impact for each service on the average home. So again, the average home price is based on the 2022 assessments, not 2023. So that might change. So once we get that new information, we will be updating all of these on the website. Again, there'll be a page on the website for each jurisdiction, and there is a split between for North Couch and North and South.
Why don't I have any power?
If I'm going too fast, please let me know. Schedule F shows our short and long-term debt. So this is up to date till the end of December 31st because we're still of 2021, because we're still in the middle of finishing up 2022. So there might be some changes to this once we get all the final numbers in. And if it changes, we will be updating it on the website. Schedule G is, shows all the capital reserves. And again, this is not updated for the end of the 2022 year because we're still in the middle of the process. So there'll be amounts that might have been used for projects this year that will have to come off of these amounts. And then once we've done year end, we will update the schedule with the new commitments for 2023 once the budget has been adopted, and then any amounts that come out. And then Schedule G, there's two parts to Schedule G. One is capital and the other one is the operating reserves. So this just shows what the balance is, again, to December 31st, 2021, and then what the commitments will be for the year, and then what the balance is at the end. Schedule 8 details the assessed value for property by jurisdiction for the last few years. As mentioned, again, these are not 2023 numbers, they're 2022 numbers. So again, these will all be updated again. So Schedule I shows how the requisition for each area is broken down among the different property classes in the area. So they'll have a schedule for each of the areas. So there'll be a page for each one. And as you can see up here for Area A, 86.55% is paid by residential into the taxes.
Tracy, before you go on, I made reference to this specific schedule yesterday in regards to the previous year on here, because that's kind of a really important, now I know we're still based on 2022. Is that going to be modified?
So you want to see like two years on this schedule?
Yes.
I'd have to see if that's possible with the way that the spreadsheet is set up. We may have to finagle some
Okay,
stuff
so
around.
yeah, you may not be aware, but I've been asking for this for a couple of years, and I know Ms. Wayner isn't here, but that's a really important schedule for electoral areas. Sorry to interrupt.
Just making a note. And this also is very similar to the reports that we handed out last year with the virtual meetings when it had the different percentage changes as too. So. Schedule J shows the summary of residential costs per 100,000 of assessed value and shows how much of the total assessment in each of the electoral areas in the municipalities so they pay. So you can see those little numbers down on the side of how much they pay into the different areas based on the 100,000. Schedule K shows the parcel tax by utility service. And this is listing all the water and sewer systems. So this is parcel tax. And then Schedule L shows the user fees for water and sewer systems. And then a history over the years on both of those schedules. And then on the website also we have a detail for each function. You will have a little hyperlink and you can click into the hyperlink and it has a bunch of pages containing each function. So we'll have a summary sheet like this and it will list a little description about the function, how people and who pays into it based on the bylaw. So that's the first sheet. The next sheet is the 5-year financial plan. So we do a 2022 as a comparative. We have the 2023 and then we have the next year. So you can kind of see where the growth has happened. And then we do a VATM detail to show what the actuals are and then what was approved for 2022 budget and then what the proposed 2023 budget is going to be. And that's for each function. And that's it.
And VATM is your principal accounting software.
Is our financial system where we plunk everything in and spit all the data out. So that's the end of the presentation for there. So I need to, Chase, how do I get to the website? How do we, is it, just go on to the?
We're doing something different. What's gonna happen?
Okay, so on the CVRD website, if you go to services, and then down to finance, and then we have a link here for the 2023 budget. So in this area, we have all of the stuff. So we have all the schedules I just went through, and then it has all the different functions. And then each little budget will be in the function, so you can review. Because as we send out the reports for next week's, we'll have a link within the report to get to this area for the functions. And that's all.
Good job, Ms. Bowen. We have a speakers list of, in the room, Director Stone, Wilson, and Manhouse. I want to go to our virtual attendees and ask if anyone's got their, I see Director Martman. I'll put you on the list, and we'll start with Director Stone. Go ahead.
First, thanks to staff and Ms. Bowen and the team for getting these online, because I was looking for them yesterday. So, you know, I'm saying this publicly because I know a 44% number for our area is going to sound like, but I'm going to reiterate again. Ladysmith participates in fewer functions than any other area. And as a result, when we do things like regional recreation, solid waste, et cetera, of the $170 and $73 or something of the increase per household in Ladysmith under Schedule E, 143 of that is regional recreation. So we knew that regional recreation, but conversely, the net to Ladysmith when we do the municipal reduction is going to be minimal on a per household basis. So it comes back to things like solid waste and things like that. And I think this highlights the necessity to both look at your Schedule E, look at your, and this is for new directors mainly, look at your Schedule E, look at your, so it just shows that, you know, the nice little bar graphs, which is such a great tool to show where your increases are hitting your residents and where the reductions. And also to dig into those functions on Schedule, is it D that has it like by function? Yeah, so you can look at your 2022-23 and Schedule D as well and do a deeper dive into the functions just you participate in your area. And that'll help you have an eraser and a sharpened pencil for our next session, because today isn't the day to start doing that dissection. Maybe a scalpel too, Mike. But today isn't the day to do that dissection, but this gives us the opportunity and the information, the opportunity today to ask those questions of staff while we're here to help inform that consideration that we go away with. Because I know we're all going to go home with our erasers, our pencils, and our scalpels and try and find ways to find savings for the residents we serve. And through that exercise, and I know we all talk about take your local hat off and put your regional hat on, but through that effort of looking at our local areas, we're all collaborating around how we bring down the entire number. So all that being said, I do have a question that's really highlighted for me is, and I believe I know the answer, but I think I need to ask, the dramatic increase to general government. My guess is something to do with IT and et cetera, but even without supplementals, at least for our area, it shows a general government increase of, I'd say 40-ish%, 35 to 40% in general government, which I think from my time is unheard of. So I'd just like to better understand from staff where that dramatic increase in general government comes from.
Ms. Bowen.
Through the chair to Director Stone. A lot of it had to do with taking money from operating reserves last year to cover costs. So now those operating reserves are no longer there to keep using it. So now those costs have to be covered by requisition this year. And then there was also COVID money that was being used, and now those funds are no longer there, so the expense has to be brought up by requisition. But to get the exact number, I'd have to look back to go through and provide that information.
Thank you.
A good area of inquiry, and I think you highlight a point that was brought up earlier about the use of operational reserves and surplus to reduce requisition. You gotta make it up the next year. So, yeah, just a good thing to consider. I've got Director Wilson, Manhas, and Martman. So anyone else while I'm looking around the room and at the screen? Director McClinton as well. Director Wilson, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So lead me through this one. If I look at Area C in this particular case here, which I'm looking at now at the moment, core requisition comparison here, Area C is 9.99%. Now, if I were to go into the other, into the schedules that we're talking about here, would I be able to calculate what the that percentage would come down if I take out certain bits and pieces? Is there a direct comparison, or would it be a complicated accountancy thing? For instance, if I tried to take out regional recreation and say, look, folks, this is what it would have been if we hadn't gone forward with that, because it is a major part of this rise here.
Through the chair to Director Wilson.
A bit complicated, I know.
It is a bit complicated because we do have this very lavish, huge requisition spreadsheet that we do. They're all linked together with numbers. So we would have to know which ones to decrease and then how it affects the whole entire picture. So yeah, it's a little playing around. So that's what, when you guys start doing your changes, Angela in the background will be working on that spreadsheet of taking things out and putting things in and moving stuff around, and then know what that percentage will change on that one. So it's not as easy to do it from the outside without that beautiful.
Yeah. So, follow up, please, Mr. Chair. If I were to send you an email saying, "Dear Ms. Bowen," starting off very nicely and all the rest of it, what would be the effect on Area C if this part were taken out and if that part were taken out? Would that put a huge workload on you guys? Because I know you're very, very busy at the moment.
Through the chair to Director Wilson, that would be a little bit extra work, but if it is the board that wants to know what the effect of regional rec is on each of their areas, we could pull it out and do an analysis and then put it back in, or,
That would be great if you can.
Through the
Okay, I'll take that up
direction.
with the chair later on. Thank you very much.
Just a point of information,
please
Mr. Chair.
proceed.
So I've been going through Schedule E is really constructive for that, or instructive, if you will, because like I look at Area C, average, now again, this is average home, right? But increase for average home in electoral area C 138.33. Of that, 172.09 is regional rec. So if you didn't have regional rec, now keep in mind, you get a huge reduction under Kerry Park Recreation through regional rec of $87. So the net of, and Couch and Performing Arts Center, $9.84. So when you start saying, okay, well, the regional rec adds 172, but then net of 87 out, 984 out, you're looking at an increase of about $80-ish, say, right? Yeah.
Because now, if I get, sorry. Yeah, and I'm sorry we're having a conversation here, but if that's correct, then the $120 a year that we're talking about is actually split into three, right? Was it split over a 3-year period?
Yeah.
So that's $40.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then you've got some other
Yeah.
reductions there. Actually, just looking at this, Mike, outside of regional rec, looks pretty good.
And I think this is actually a very constructive exercise as an example of what I think we'll be having at our more in-depth meetings. And so I think what I'm just hearing from this, and I'm looking at Mr. Elzinga and Ms. Bowen here, I think the board's interest or the committee's interested in hearing what everything looks like with the isolation of regional rec as a component, just so that we have that tool to go to explain to our residents when we're ultimately done. So does that make sense? They're taking notes. Does that help, Mike? Great.
And Mr. Chair, with all, please accept my apologies. I have to leave now to go to an appointment. I'll be back in maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Maybe we'll be done by then. We'll see.
Mr. Chair, if I may just finish. So I was just saying to the
Please.
new directors especially, if you want to look at functions and how they affect your taxation, that Schedule E is just the
It's
bee's
golden.
knees.
It's a really great reference tool. Thank you for that. On the list? Yes. Director Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bowen, for that presentation. Would it, I know this year there were no limits set as to percentage increase to the budget. In the past, it has been. Would it be better or advisable for the board to set a limit moving forward in future years so they got something to work with?
Well, I'm going to answer that for you. We have that ability to do that in a few months. So it's been done both ways.
Yeah, because I just think right from the start, so you don't see this astronomical number that freaks everybody out and it gets in the paper. Oh, it's going to be huge increase of such and such, and rather so you have some guidelines actually moving forward. So this is a core. We've got this much room for supplementals or stuff like that. So.
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Director Manhas. Yes, we do come to the board, as Director Morrison explained, and we do ask for a mandate because it does help staff kind of picture where they need to be. This year, there was a lot of things that affected us, like you guys talk about groceries, it's fuel. Fuel's huge for the CVRD and BC Hydro, Terracin Gas, all of those which are out of our control, and they increase that. Insurance goes up. There's a lot of things that are out of our control. Plus, then we have the QP and all the agreements with the unions that we have to consider those percentages as well. So they do try their best to, if they have to have a mandate, do their best to get to it.
And there is actually a downside to doing that because then we're empowering staff to make decisions around reducing or cutting services. And we've actually, I've been here when the budgets come forward with the cap and directors going, well, hey, wait a minute, I didn't want that from my area to be cut. So there's pros and cons to both approaches. Does that conclude your remarks? Ms. Mohan. I think we need more staff mics.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment on what you just said, which has to do with what happens if you give staff a mandate, and the mandate has to result in cuts. And so if you look at the some of the budget materials that you'll be going through, there is a budget page called year over year. And one section of that year-over-year analysis is a portion saying, what would it cost to restore services to the previous level? So staff, they can make recommendations on what to cut to meet a certain budget mandate, but ultimately that information comes back to the board so that you're aware of what would be cut. It's quite transparent, and then the board gets to make the decision ultimately about whether a service gets cut, not staff.
Thank you for that. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. I'll start with the one that's closer to home, and that's the Area H budget. I'm looking at Schedule E, and I'm just hoping in the future when we talk about this in more detail, I don't see the impact of, because Area H pays Ladysmith some funding for recreation, and if that's being taken out, there'll be less this year because it will be 1/3 of it, because of the transition to regional rec, how that plays into the overall tax that Area H residents will pay. So is that something that can be noted?
It should be on the budget with the specifics around that, but Ms. Bowen, please.
Through the chair to Director Martman, I do not have that schedule in front of me to look directly at it to see the changes, but we can get back to you on to what it is and have a look at it. But it should be, the changes should be there, so I'll have to have a look.
And your second question?
And I know this is an apples and oranges question, and I think I know the answer, but overall, I think we have an obligation to taxpayers to try to look at the big picture of the impact of other budgets. So the question I have is around the budget of the hospital, and how does that all play into the overall, not our requisition as a regional district, but I guess the big picture, when the person gets their tax bill, property tax bill, how does that play into it? And is it okay to ask that question? Because it's sort of outside of this budget talk, but I think it impacts everybody.
I'm not going to let Ms. Bowen answer that question because I think it might be more appropriate. You ready, Aaron? Nope. Anyone else want to tackle that one? Because it is an apples and oranges question, but it's a fair one. So, did you hear him?
Yeah, as I'm interested, I was starting to look at my taxes because I live in Area H.
So, Director Martman, do you want to repeat your question? I think the chair of the regional hospital district might be able to help you with that. And Ms. Bowen put her hand up as well. So,
I'll go to Ms. Bowen first.
Repeat your question first.
Sure. I think because we all sit on the hospital board and we know that the budget for the hospital has gone up, huge, and I think in my impression is that we have a portion that we're responsible for, and that portion obviously is being paid by the taxpayers of the region. And how is that it being impacted? What's the increase in that, and how does that play into the overall hit I think a taxpayer has?
Through the chair to Director Martman, the hospital district is a separate entity from the CVRD, so we have to keep their budgets separate. They don't correlate with one another. And it's the same on the property taxes for a rural resident. There's the school tax, there's police tax, there's other stuff on there that we do not have control over. Those are ones that come on, and we don't get to see what that impact will have with ours added to it, what it's going to affect the tax payer in the end. We don't see that. So the hospital is a separate entity, but I will turn over to Director Stone.
And I'll go to Director Stone, and
I'll carefully address it.
And he will carefully address it, and if you can read between the lines, you'll understand why he's going to carefully address it.
So, thanks, Ms. Bowen. Separate budget, but what Director Martman, what you're asking is how is this going to affect our taxpayer, school taxes, those other things we don't control, as well as the cost escalation on the hospital. So that hasn't been addressed publicly. So I think it's inappropriate to speak to it now. But our understanding is that we'll continue to tax at the existing level that we've been using to develop reserves, and that is then should be to address our portion of the debt taken on to develop the hospital. But until we get confirmation from the province and Island Health, I think at this stage it's too early to comment on that.
And I think that's about all the answer you're going to get, Director Martman. Is that okay? Excellent. We'll go to Director McClinton.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. First, just want to acknowledge the staff for putting these budgets together. I know it's a tremendous amount of work, and I know, having spoken to many of you, you live in the area, you care about it. So just want to acknowledge the hard work getting us prepped for this. I've heard regional rec more times today than at any board meeting. And it seems to be a big portion of the increases. I'm curious, can we expect similar increases next year, or how does that look? And if not, I guess the question is there any opportunity there to maybe phase it in, or because it seems to be making up a huge portion of the increases?
So
Thank you.
I'll open it with we're already phasing, and go to Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much more to add than what you just said, that it is already being phased. The apportionment has been approved by the board as such, and the budgets reflect that.
Can I have a quick follow-up? So just to be, more or less, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but are we expecting similar increases of the percentage-wise next year? Is that for the next 3 years, we can expect whatever it was, a 6% increase?
Mr. Elzinga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the director, the answer is yes. So this is 1/3 of the impact, and so you can see reflected on Schedule E, the decreases for the existing contributors to functions and the increase to regional recreation. That will be reflected for the next 3 years, so in the 2024 and 2025 budgets.
Does that
Thank you.
conclude your inquiries? Great. Director Abbott?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this was covered during our orientation, and if it was, I apologize, and if it's too basic a query, I'd love to, from the perspective as a former business person building budgets, I have a question about how municipal budgets or regional district budgets are created. You have some broad captions called requisitions, and capital reserves, operating reserves, debt, gas tax, and other. The latter intrigues me. Gas tax, I think we touched on yesterday that it is uncertain at best whether we'll see that again. I understand what a reserve is, but is it a zero-sum game each year that the team builds from requisitions? You start from zero and we have to requisition everything? I just need a little bit more clarity, and if it's preferable to take this offline, I wouldn't mind chatting with staff.
Can you give us a Coles Notes version and then maybe we can expand further? And I'm sure that for the new directors, if you're wanting a little bit more information, we can arrange for that to happen in between meetings. So, Ms. Bowen.
Through the chair to Director Abbott. They start with what the requisition from the previous year, and they will maybe decrease or increase depending. It depends on debt, so if they get debt this year, well then the requisition has to increase next year to pay for the debt payments. So then that can only be paid by requisition, like debt can only be paid, you can't use surpluses or anything, or operating reserves to pay your debt off. So then that will cause an increase. So they look at the whole picture of everything and what their revenues are going to be based on what the last year was. The other kind of falls in what happens at the rec centers, like what they're doing for bringing in for skating or rentals and stuff like that. So that's where that extra money comes from. So each budget manager will look at their budget compared to what they've done, even history, and seeing where things were. We're still just coming right out of COVID, so there's still some increases that might happen or there might not be. So it's a tough game for everybody, and trying to make sure we get everything and account for everything. It's a little bit of starting with the starting point, not with zero, but starting with what they had last year, run that service, and then if they have to increase a little bit.
I had a supplemental, but I suspect Ms. Moen.
Ms. Moen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Director Abbott, the question about zero-based budgeting is a good question, and it has been raised by the board in the past, and in prior years, we have used zero-based budgeting in a couple of instances, specifically with solid waste and recycling, and somewhat with parks and trails, where we've reduced back down to zero and then built up the functions. So in the spring, when we were seeking budget direction, I prepared a report with a little bit of history around how the budget is done, different changes to the budget process, and going into a little more detail about things like what services have been reviewed and which budgets have benefited from zero-based budgeting in the past. And so I'm happy to redistribute that to the board so that you get a little bit of a backstory on how we have ended up in this place right now with the way we do budgeting.
Thank you for that. Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Moen, Ms. Moen. We've been asked, or reading between the lines, we sense that we should be delving into our various regions, areas, and sharpening the pencil. So unless there's a debt component that has to be carried until the debt is fulfilled, I suspect that the inertia of just, if it's always been this dollar amount, those are areas that we could look at and challenge whether they have to continue going forward.
Ms. Bowen?
Through the chair to Director Abbott, it would have to have discussions with the budget managers within those functions, because finance, we just get the overview of everything. We don't know the nuances of what runs that function and what they need to keep their services up and going for the general public. So that would have to include those managers so that we get the right information.
Thank you for that Coles Note version.
And I can say that our staff are very good at assisting when, like, thinking specifically of parks. Now, parks are a high interaction function that we have, but in my community parks, I know that they're costly to maintain that level of service in the parks, but it's a really appreciated and highly used area. So we can have those discussions with staff on the various different functions. I don't think anybody wants to go back to zero on their parks maintenance. So where do we start and what's the comfort level? And they're more than willing to have those discussions. I've got myself on the list and I'm going to rapid fire because go ahead, Ms. Bowen.
I just wanted to add that there's contracts that we have signed with, like, the hauling for solid waste. We have parks contracts for maintenance and stuff that are already in place in maybe 5 years. So we are obligated to make sure that those are in our budget and that we're paying those.
I really appreciate the time and the clarity. Thank you.
So I'm going to sort of rapid fire a couple things out here, which I don't need answers for. Are we going to be having a discussion on the impacts of the assessment? We're working off of 2022. We're going to get the completed and revised in the next few months. Can we have a bit of a primer on that? Secondly, and if you've heard the allocations bit been talked about quite a bit, and it's a really annoying thing, in your consideration of the various budgets as we're moving forward, please don't look at changing an allocation budget. It's not that it's impossible to do, but it would cause all sorts of issues for staff to have to go in to redo work that they did 6 months ago. And it's got a domino effect on basically all of the budgets. So that's a note to the new directors. We are loath to try and change allocation budgets at this stage. Third thing, will we be in a position in our later meetings to have actual, I think you referred to it, live updates as we go, and will that be just at board? And lastly, strong fiscal futures from 2013, I'm looking at 2013. Please go and read that document. Now, there was an update and the UBCM looked more on the expenditure side as opposed to the new revenue source side. I'm going to suggest that might be something that the board may want to look at as far as resolutions to ABICC and UBCM. I think we have to start pursuing other resource opportunities, other funding opportunities that, there are jurisdictions around the world that have done some of these things. So just bring that up. And with that, I'll go to Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate. Let's try that again. Through you, if I may, first of all, thank you very much for that presentation and clarification on some of the questions I had. One of the ones I'm hoping that we can implement is in-person budget updates for sub-regional sections, for instance. If we look at area FI in the town for a public informative budget meeting, whether that has been considered or discussed, aside from the virtual aspect. I know we had gone from public input and public presentations to the virtual as we were moving in and out of health restrictions. I'd like to see public possibilities if that is at all possible.
Thank you, Director McGonigal. Director McClinton. You're muted. You're muted. Yes.
Director McClinton, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I thought I clicked it. Apologies. First, I just wanted to say what I was saying on mute. We've got our work cut out for us with this budget. Like, even if we were to hold the line of the 9% increase for services and even cut that, we're still looking at an increase, significant increase for a tax base. So I just can't emphasize how much of a challenge this is going to be. Anyways, my question is, I know in the past, I remember driving by, coming from Victoria to Ladysmith, seeing sponsorship on our recreation facilities. Is that an option? I mean, this is the business side of me. Can we hire a sales rep and maybe generate some revenue for our significant recreation centers? Is that being looked at? Can we consider that for maybe offsetting some costs?
Mr. Elzinga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to the director. That question has actually just been asked at the Cowichan Community Center Commission at their last meeting. Obviously, for the board's information, it was named the Island Savings Center from 2008 through 2018 for a significant sponsorship. There were some challenges to re-up a sponsor for that facility, but the commission has recently asked for a report, which is going to be coming forward to the January 12th Cowichan Community Center Commission to discuss sponsorship opportunities, and can certainly be discussed at any other recreation commission.
Follow-up?
Quick follow-up, yeah, and I don't know who this question should go to, Chair, but I mean, perhaps we could put a subcommittee together to support that. I mean, we've got significant recreation facilities. I mean, we bank at the Bank of Nova Scotia. I mean, just things start popping into my mind. So I think that's a worthwhile effort if people are interested. Thank you.
Director McClinton, we have some corporate strategic planning coming up, and I think that's a great time to have that fulsome discussion. I've got Director Nicholson. Did I see you trying to get my attention? You didn't. Okay. So do you have additional pages to go through or any other? We've got obviously the supplemental list, but where do you want to go next?
To the chair, my part is over, but Danielle's got the supplemental.
Well, do you want to come up from, please? Aaron, is that mic on, and could you aim it towards you? Perfect.
Hello again. So I am here to speak, Mr. Chair, about the supplemental budget requests. You had in your packet a very brief briefing note and a chart that had some bold colors in it. And I apologize for the small text. We can provide a printed copy of a larger version if you should like to have that. So I don't have a presentation, but I'm just going to provide a quick summary of the note. And then in today's meeting, we weren't planning to delve into great detail in these items. They are coming forwards again on January 12th to the ASC for you to go over item by item, and then to full board on January 26th, I believe, to the Committee of the Whole. So the supplemental requests that you have in front of you are proposed non-core expenditures and new capital items. As you'll see by the chart, most of these items are tied to the asset management plan or another board-endorsed plan, or things that are absolutely critical in nature that have come up. So for instance, like a building issue that we need to replace a roof or something like that. So new capital, additional services, increased staffing levels would be included in there as well, and just the unexpected expenditures. So there are 72 items on the list, and the ones in red at the top of the list were rated by the senior management team as absolutely critical. And then moving down to yellow, those were the medium ranked items, and the green are the necessary to fund but not as critical, could potentially be moved forward to a future budget. At the end of the list there are items that are in white. They came in later than the process of ranking that we scheduled late last fall. And so I will commit to you to, before the 12th meeting, have a conversation with the senior management team so we can actually rank those for you, so you don't have to have them just hanging out there and not in context. So we'll do that for you before the meeting. So 72 supplemental requests. 29 of those are ranked as high priority, 26 as medium, and 8 as lower priority. Not to say the ones in green aren't important to fund, but we've tried to provide you with a bit of perspective there because we understand you're going to have to make some hard choices. In context of the entire budget, if all core supplementals were funded, it would be an additional 3.26% increase to requisition for 2023. And as noted in your package there, if only you fund the red high priority items, you're looking at a 1.2% increase to requisition. So the medium and the lower level items don't equate to a large amount, but that gives you a bit of perspective on how they add up in the budget. So we will be prepared to go over these item by item on the 12th and then again on the 26th with the full board, but happy to answer any questions you have on this at this time.
Stay where you are. I've got Director Stone and myself, and looking around the table and across the screen, do we have anyone? We're hopefully not going to get into a bunch of detail here, but anyone on virtual? No, at this point. I'll look to Ben again. Director Stone.
Yeah, so just a couple of notes. Obviously, for focus, if we're talking about requisition increases this year, look at the requisition column. Because, you know, if it's capital reserves and things like that, those are things we've been saving for to fund this year. So really those, if we're talking about impacts on taxation, just look at that requisition line. Of course, look at everything, but that requisition line is key in terms of the more immediate conversation. And while it's been brought up, and I think that closing this conversation, we need to have a scheduled conversation. As of yesterday's meeting on our website, the updated schedule that the board adopted December 14th hasn't been published. So on the 26th, it shows that we're doing public presentations in North Cowichan in areas A, B, C, and D, which apparently we're not doing now. So we do need to, I don't know if maybe with the schedule uploads today that's been fixed. And also it's created a bunch of conflicts for a number of directors at this table. The 26th, I know all the ICE-T appointees at this table, which means the board members who have gone from the RAC, which is at least 3 of our directors, won't be here because they'll be in Courtenay. And because the days of the week weren't on there, I apologize at the December 14th not recognizing. And also there's a late February date that's also conflicting with a number of dates for a number of municipal directors. So inadvertently in changing the schedule without consulting the already established schedules of other organizations and the munis, we've created conflicts. So maybe we can have that discussion once we're done with this item. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And just, this is a personal perspective of mine, is that budget is, in my view, the top priority of directors for, you know, our responsibilities. Budget's, you know, top of the heap. And so if we can, and, you know, I'm not suggesting that directors that have outside responsibilities, because I have them too, change those, but we have to come up with dates and meeting opportunities where we can all be here. And that's really important because we speak for our communities, but we also have a responsibility collectively to get this work done. And also, I just wanted to bring up, and I'm not going to delve deeply, but when we're looking at this, when you're at home looking at this, realize that not everything on here is going to have an impact for anybody else. And I'm just going to use a quick example. There's one down there in the white that's for a water system in my area that should probably get done. It won't affect anybody else. It'll actually just affect the ratepayers in that area. And I'm probably going to recommend that it go forward because by replacing that pipe, it's going to save a whole bunch of service calls for the pipe that's in the ground now that's bursting all the time. So we've got some little idiosyncrasies in our list that will only apply to individual or perhaps sub-regional areas that we can get into more detail at a later date. So with that, I'm looking around the room, looking to our online participants. I'm wondering if we're now moving to where we might be wrapping up. Ms. Moen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was listening and appreciating that right now, all you have in front of you is a very colorful spreadsheet with the supplemental requests, but I've just confirmed with Ms. Bowen that in advance of the January 19th meeting, you will receive a package where each one of those supplemental requests will have some detail, a detail sheet behind it so that you can answer some of your questions and understand the rationale behind why it's on there, so.
And just a quick question, is there a chance, I don't want to create work, but of reformatting so that you can actually track from one end of the spreadsheet to the other without getting lost? Is there a way that that can be done before our next meeting? Simply?
One option is that we expand the size of it, but just take out some of the columns that aren't as critical, and just have that information ready to discuss with you. Just simplifying the chart, if that would help.
That might be helpful, and we'll all have the original anyways, so that's good. Okay, I'm looking around the room. I don't see any of our online participants, directors here. I think I'll go to Mr. Robbins. What do we got next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your agenda, items 3, delegations, 4, correspondence, 5, information. We just finished 6 reports. There's no unfinished business, no new business, which moves us to question period.
Oh, right, schedule, please, Director Stone.
Just regarding the schedule, the other date I think is February 24th, so it's been unusual, and I don't know, I feel like we always have this comment, maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I don't remember us, usually when we had these dual days scheduled, wasn't it usually our regular day and then the Thursday? But these Friday dates, what the issue is, and I get your comment as well taken about our responsibilities to this organization, but we also have responsibilities that are legislatively outlined with the appointments that we take. So the 3 board members of ICE-T do have requirements to complete their processes, get a report to the province in the month of February, and present our annual reports and stuff and our plans for the coming year, because that's provincial money we're spending. As appointees from the CVRD, we're sent there by this organization to represent us amongst our island and coastal community members. So the 24th of February is also the ICE-T board meeting. And for those who haven't maybe followed the story closely, this is also a pressure cooker point for the ICE-T organization. So the January 26th date that we've referred to multiple times today that was added December 15th, didn't recognize that these organizations have all scheduled meetings because of the published calendars we had put forward. And I didn't recognize it at the time, and I'll take responsibility for that, but we've approved a January 26th meeting and a February 24th meeting that seem quite critical here, that would negatively impact roles and responsibilities for a number of people around this table. And they're both very important dates, so I'm not sure how we proceed from here, but you know, it's a bit of a tough one. I don't think as a CVRD appointee and chair of the Island Coastal Economic Trust, I can ignore those meetings, but I do feel that responsibility around this budget in particular. So looking for some help here.
Great point. I'm going to turn to staff, and because there's ICE-T, there's treaty, there's all the other appointees and or appointments that have been made, and what I'm going to suggest is that we each individually sit down and look at our calendars to see if we are actually in conflict anywhere. I'm going to look to Mr. Robbins and Ms. Miles Wilson. Yes, it's a published calendar that the board's approved, but clearly we don't want to have gaps and lapses by directors not being able to attend. So I look to you two. How can we begin to correct the calendar issues and quickly?
So I apologize, we don't have it up for you here, but I'll just quickly go through the dates, and then we will send it out so that everybody has it at the top of their inbox. But we're looking at the next meeting being January 12th, the special EASC to discuss budgets and supplementals. That's the day one of going through each item, or most items. And then the 19th of January, another second meeting, EASC. The 26th of January, special committee of the whole for everyone. February 2nd is scheduled for 2 virtual public meetings, areas A, B, C, and one for D, E, and the City of Duncan, Municipality of North Cowichan. February 9th, another 2 virtual meetings. Again, we're going to send this out by email. And then February 23rd and 24th, special board meetings, review of all budget prior to adoption. And then, excuse me, March 8th, regular board meeting for approving the annual budget. So what I could propose, we do have a little bit of wiggle room, not a lot of wiggle room, because we have to get it done by the end of March. So if we can send it out, sorry, frog in my throat, and you can reasonably take a look at your own schedules. And I understand that end of January is problematic, like the chair mentioned, so we'll probably have to wiggle around a little bit there. But if you can provide just some concise comments back regarding what will not work, and let us work with the rest of the schedule. I understand that it's typically been Wednesdays and Thursdays. I was schooled on that before. I did not know that. So the beginning and the end of the week are problematic for people with their responsibilities. So we will prompt you with an email. Feel free to send us back your thoughts. We'll try to collate that, and we will do our best to take a look at the schedule and wiggle around, because we definitely want to make it manageable for all of you. So those are my comments, and happy to answer any questions or
I'll go to
more
Director
detail.
Stone in a second, but I just want to float something and don't shoot the messenger, but is there anybody that is where a potential Saturday meeting is impossible? Yes.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. But just thought I'd float the idea. Okay.
So if I may.
Director Stone, go
I
ahead.
don't think the 26, I think we can work with the 26. We talked about this yesterday, and if we can kind of end it like 3-ish, maybe? And if we have to keep moving to a next meeting for more items, then it's just that we do have to be in Courtney, Director Acton, Staples, Stone, and I think that might be it for that meeting. I think at 5:30 or something, or 5.
Okay, so ending at 3, and following up, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, are evenings at all possible? If we need to work with the evenings, start a meeting a bit later and work into the evenings. Is anybody, no, I see a couple of, no, that's not going to work. Okay.
So if I can just finish.
Go ahead.
The 24th date, I think, is the tough one. So February 24th, I think, is the only one that sort of sticks out. It's just been a lot. I don't know, this is my 3rd term. Does anybody else who's been around here remember this? Like this flurry and intensity of meetings, both municipally and regional district. I know every term we have this sort of pressure point, but I don't remember it ever being this volume of meetings. Anyway, so maybe it's just a COVID hangover or something, but yeah.
Director Abbott?
I probably don't have the most pressing calendar, but that week, Tuesday, February 21, would that work as an alternate, Director Stone?
I'd have to go into all my calendars.
I think instead of trying to fly by the seat of our pants, we're
I
going to have
think
to go
that
back,
I
look
have
at
a
our
council
calendars. And
stuff that day, so Tuesdays are generally town council days.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, this is really tough, and we'll do our best to make sure that we can best accommodate the most of us here. Preferably, everyone is best. So, anything else, Director Abbott? Looking around the table, looking at the screen, Director Nicholson, Martman, McClinton, nothing. Okay, I think we're gonna go to question period.
Mr. Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, we have in the CVRD significant park area and wetlands. Is the CVRD collecting any carbon credits for any of these things? And I'm talking about hundreds of acres we have.
So that's very tangentially related to the budget. I will pose that to our staff. I don't know that we're actively engaged in any external carbon credit markets, but I will ask that question and respond to you at our next committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question of the committee chair?
Mr. Chair, my name is Kim Bernard. I'm the president of the Shawnigan Lake Rotary Eco Club, and I noticed that the budget for bylaw enforcement is going down significantly in the 2023 numbers, and I'm wondering if that will enable or disempower our ability to follow through on the priorities that we faced in safeguarding our watershed and safeguarding our environment, particularly the riparian zone damage. Thank you.
So the answer that I will give you on the basis of, we haven't done the deep dive into that, is that we have just done a review of our bylaw enforcement delivery mechanisms and the likes, and I think it was a very well done exercise. And because there's so many factors that go into the funding and the allocation of the expenses that I'm not, I wouldn't suggest that there is any reduction in service being contemplated. The core that we have had presented to us is on the basis of maintaining the current service level. So just as a very high level answer, I don't see, and I haven't been informed that there is any reduction in service in bylaw enforcement.
Okay, and one follow-up question. I noticed that the budget for the drinking water and watershed protection program is going up significantly, and I'm wondering if that will also include the work that we're doing in the south end, particularly in Shawnigan Lake, and we'll have coverage for that. Thank you.
And once again, we haven't gone into that yet, but I think given the newness of the function and the mandate behind it and the good work in launching that function, I don't anticipate there being any reductions and probably enhancements. And I think our staff, well, they're not necessarily in the room, they're certainly listening. And I think you could be assured that there's the work that needs to be done is being contemplated by the delivery of service in that function.
And lastly, will there be opportunity for public input in those processes?
There will be opportunity at every public meeting to provide input, yes.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. I look to the directors online, seeing no hands raised. Mr. Robbins, what's our next order of business?
There is no closed session, and so we move to adjournment.
Moved by Director Stone. Seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. The motion carries. Look at that.